Okay, it's time to take a deep dive on the hero that was at the absolute bottom of my favorite heroes list when I did it a couple months ago. Hello and welcome to Nelson All Over Cars. I just got done playing a ton of games with She-Hulk, and now we're going to be taking a deep dive, looking at her strengths, her weaknesses, all of her cards, kind of talking about deck builds, some cards that she likes, and then ranking her in aspects as well as in the overall ranking of all the Marvel Champions characters. So we got a lot to cover, so let's dive into it. So Jennifer Walters has a really impressive 5 recovery. She has 15 hit points and a 6 hand size. Off to a pretty good start, but there are a couple things that mess with that. She does have a pretty good ability. It's an interrupt that says that whenever a threat would be placed on a scheme, you can prevent one of that threat. So this does help with being down in Alter Ego when someone would scheme, or I guess at the beginning of the villain phase, thinking about Solo, you prevent the one threat from being placed on the scheme. And so this can help with some of that threat mitigation, but that is one of her weaknesses. So this is a really nice ability in order to help her flip down to Alter Ego, which she does want to be flipping quite frequently. She has a couple of cards that support her Alter Ego side, like Superhuman Law Division, which is a 1-cost support that states that you can exhaust Superhuman Law Division, spend a mental resource to remove 2 threat from a scheme. It's not an awful cost payout, right? So total of, once you have it onto the table, 1 effective cost for 2 threat removal. Not horrible. It is a little unfortunate that it's locked to Alter Ego, and it's a nice way to offset her 1 thwart stat in hero form. That being said, it's way better than her other card, which is Legal Practice. This is a 0-cost card, and it states that you can discard up to 5 cards in your hand and remove 1 threat from a scheme for each card discarded this way. This is Alter Ego only, and this is a bad card. This is bad. I don't ever typically run this. It's a minimum 2 effective costs, so the card itself plus 1 card that you're discarding for 1 threat removal. That's not good payout. I like to compare this to Emergency, which is half the cost. It's 1 card. It's an interrupt that's a little different, but it's not locked to Alter Ego. It's an interrupt that states when the villain schemes, reduce the amount of threat placed by 1. I think Emergency is a bad card, and it is more flexible. I think overall more flexible. Now, it does take a scheme to activate, but I think it's more flexible than Legal Practice. And if we go to the high end of the card, it's 6 effective resources. So 5 cards discarded plus the card itself to remove 5 threat, which is way worse than like Crisis Averted, which is 4 effective resources, 3 plus the card itself to remove 6 threat. And that's a hard sell. Crisis Averted is a hero action, so it's locked to hero form, but you're typically in hero more often than not than in Alter Ego in a solo player game. And we like hero cards to be better than their aspect counterparts. So I typically don't ever run this card. You have to run it, but I'm using it as a resource. She does want to be coming to Alter Ego frequently, mainly to take advantage of the 6 hand size, but also her Do You Even Lift response that triggers whenever you flip into hero is pretty solid. So whenever you flip into hero form, you get to deal 2 damage to an enemy. It's nice to have 2-3 damage. And then she also has a fairly decent hero stat line. She's a 1-3-2 stat line. She only has 4 hand size, which does hurt her pretty significantly. That 4 hand size versus the 5 hand size is significant, but a 3 attack is good. A 3 attack is really solid. You want to be flipping and utilizing that basic activation for your attack because She-Hulk's strength is her damage output, and she has a lot of that. Let's talk about some of her cards. So we're going to talk about her signature ally first, which is Hellcat. It's a really cool signature ally. It's a 3-cost ally with a 2-1-3 stat line, and her ability states that you can pull Hellcat back to your hand. This is great because it can really help offset some of She-Hulk's threat removal. With her core deck, if I'm building like a protection or an aggression build, a lot of my threat mitigation does come from Hellcat because of that 2 thwart stat. And what's really fun is you can get like 2 damage on her, pull her back, and play her again with full health. And so it's a really cool kind of pseudo resource sink, especially with her small hand size. So what we talked about in the the resource video is that smaller hand size heroes have a harder time playing cards because they have less options available to them, and they like resource sinks. They like places that they can put their resources if they draw into a not so great hand size, and Hellcat can be that. You pop her back to your hand, and now you have something that you can spend 3 resources on. Or if you need the extra resource, you can pull Hellcat back and use her as a resource. But typically I'm using her to pull back player again, and just have a consistent 2 threat removal each turn. So I do like Hellcat. The next card we're going to talk about is Focus Rage. I do think that this is kind of She-Hulk's saving grace. She has 2 of these cards, they're 3 cost upgrades, and it allows you to take a damage in order to draw a card. Card draw is really good, especially on these 4 hand size heroes. You can effectively get 25% more cards. She has 2 of them, so you can get up to a 6 hand size at the cost of 2 health in hero form, which is good. That's very good. More often than not, I'm triggering both of these. She-Hulk has 15 hit points. She has a lot of room to use her health as a resource, and in this sense, quite literally as a resource, right? Health for card draw. Take that every day. It can be a little expensive to get out, especially if you draw them while you're in hero form, because you're effectively using your entire hand to put it onto the table. Early in the game, that's probably worth it, because you do get bumped up to that 5 and then 6 hand size throughout the game, giving She-Hulk more options. It also has some really nice synergy with the next card we're going to talk about, which is Gamma Slam, and this is probably one of the more interesting cards that she has. It's a 4 cost card, and it deals damage equal to the amount of damage you have taken. Which is fun, up to a maximum of 15. It's really cool to hit that Gamma Slam for 15. It's epic. You can pretty much wipe like stage 1 of villains, some stage 2 villains as well, and it's just like a huge, massive damage output. The problem is it is a high cost card. It costs 4, and so you need either to have come from Alter Ego, have a Focus Rage, have a resource generator, because in hero form, you cannot play this card if you don't have any generation on the table and you just draw into it. 4 hand size, 4 cost card, you're locked out of playing it. That being said, you're typically not playing this early game. It is more of a late game card, which means you probably will have those generators out and you will be able to pay for these. You want at least 10 damage for this to be like cost effective. Now you can play it without it being cost effective, but if we're thinking about like our cost to benefit ratio, kind of 10 damage is where I like to be for something like this. We don't have a lot of things to compare 4 cost damage cards to, which is kind of interesting. It's unique in her kit. It's sort of unique in her kit, I guess I could say. But so I'm looking for like 10 damage, which means that I have to have sustained 10 damage, which is pretty significant. Yeah, but it is fun. I will not argue with anyone saying that it is not fun. It is a cool and epic card to play. Nice late game card, and it is fun to win with it. Next card we're going to talk about is Ground Stomp. This is a card that was really fun in Ultron, especially in the core set. Deals 1 damage to everybody or every enemy on the table. In Solo, which we're kind of focusing on Solo for this review, it is the exact same card as Beat 'em Up. And we typically like our hero cards to outpace the aspect or basic cards. Beat 'em Up is deal 1 damage to the enemy and every enemy engaged with you, whereas Ground Stomp is every enemy at the table. And so in Solo, every enemy at the table is engaged with you. So same card, would like to be a little bit more payoff for the cost that I'm paying for Ground Stomp. It is pretty situational. It can be really good in Ultron. However, outside of Ultron, it can be kind of difficult to play. I think my favorite thing about this card is that it's a mental resource, so it can actually trigger Superhuman Law Division, which is probably not where we want our cards to be. That's our favorite part, is that it's a mental resource. Next up, we're going to talk about Superhuman Strength. This is an upgrade that gives She-Hulk +2 attack. It is a forced response that you have to discard this card after an enemy attack, and then you get to stun an enemy. This is pretty good. For a 2-cost upgrade, it's 2 damage if you use your basic attack and a stun. I like that payoff. It's nice because then you can preserve your health pool and utilize the health pool for your Focus Rages even more, because you don't have to worry about taking another enemy attack. Now, She-Hulk has a lot of ways to deal with damage dealt. Her high recovery, a couple other basic cards that we will talk about here in a second. But it is nice to have a stun on the table because taking enemy attacks is typically bad. Now we do need to be careful here because this is a forced response after She-Hulk attacks, which means that it will trigger off an attack event. So if you play an attack event, you have a forced response to discard this card. You still get the stun, but you lose the +2 attack bonus. And so now we need to, I like to at least, try and make sure that whenever I play this, I have the ability to make a basic attack activation so I can take advantage of the +2 attack as well as the stun. But 2 damage and a stun, 2 cost, pretty solid in my book. Next card we're talking about is 1-2 Punch. This is a pretty good card. So it states after you make a basic attack, you get to Ready She-Hulk. This is a nice 1 cost card for 3 damage. It does run into the problem that we have with some of the other Gamma heroes, right? That they are very much hindered if they are stunned or exhausted, because this is a response after you make a basic attack. So we do need to be able to make that attack, and that can be an issue. Now there are some basic cards that help us get out of that pickle, which we'll talk about here in a second, but it can feel bad if you are locked out. You have this 1-2 punch, you have exhaustion that pops out, and exhaustion exhausts you, and now if you don't have a way to ready, this is a dead card in your hand, so that can be an issue. However, if you have ways to ready, if you are ready, pretty solid payoff, especially just to kind of push that damage. 3 attack is very, very good, and if you can get multiple activations of that 3 attack stat, we're feeling pretty good. The next card we're going to talk about is the most fun card in her kit, and potentially the entire core box, that's Split Personality. I say potentially because I love Backflip. Backflip is maybe the most fun card, especially if you can draw into it, but this is not a video about Spider-Man. It is a video about She-Hulk. Split Personality is really cool. So it's a 3 cost card that says you get to change form and draw up to your printed hand size. So this does not take the place of your normal form change. So you can change into hero form, play Split Personality, and switch back. You get two activations. Or what I like to do is be able to, maybe if I can play it in hero form, flip down to alter ego form, draw up to the 6 hand size, and now we can flip back into hero form, trigger the Do You Even Live, deal 2 damage, and now I have a full fresh set of 6 cards to play from. This is really cool. It has a really nice tempo boost, especially in the early game. If you can draw this turn 1 and you're able to maintain your status in alter ego for the villain phase, I really like using this, flipping up, wiping my hand, flipping back down to alter ego, drawing back up to 6, and hopefully drawing some of those building blocks, Focus Rages, Avengers Mansions, not Quinn Carrier, but Helicarrier. These cards that you can play in alter ego and get kind of your resource generators going can be a really nice boost early game. Those are the cards. I wanted to talk through each one of the cards, and I'm going to add another segment to these videos based off of one of the videos that Villain Theory and I did, where we talked about how to adjust the cost curve for specific heroes to help their deck building options. And on the screen now, you're going to see She-Hulk's cost curve. It's pretty expensive. It has an average cost of 1.87 per card, which puts her right outside the top 10 most expensive kits in the entire game. This is especially difficult because of her small hand size in hero form. So with a higher cost hero kit, we want more cards to be able to play those cards, and yet She-Hulk is also hindered with the 4 hand size. And so when we're looking at deck building options, we do want to try and bring that cost curve down and just lower the amount of cost. So we're not necessarily looking to add in a ton of high cost cards into She-Hulk's kit. We want to put them in low, give her more options so that she can take advantage of either the high cost cards or have multiple cards that she can play when we're adding in those lower cost cards. Let's talk about some of the basic cards that she likes. Crew Quarters is really good. Because She-Hulk wants to be flipping a lot and she's using her health as a resource, we can offset the damage dealt by the Focus Rages with Crew Quarters. Crew Quarters, alter ego action, exhaust, heal a damage from a hero or an alter ego in solo, that's going to be you. And so if you use 2 Focus Rages, you flip down, trigger Crew Quarters, next turn, trigger 2 Crew Quarters, and flip right back up. You've offset an entire turn of 2 Focus Rages, which can help. Now we are anti-synergistic with Gamma Slam, but taking damage in Marvel Champions is not a hard thing to do. And so I'd rather be preserving that health with Crew Quarters and just activating it because I do want to be flipping so frequently. She does like using health as a resource, And so any ways to get more of that is a good thing. So endurance, or I'm just gonna say it, symbiote suit is pretty good with She-Hulk. We're not gonna go too deep into that, but any ways that we can get more health because she wants to be using that health as a resource is a good card to include. So endurance I'm always looking to add, especially because that's the only way you can really trigger, or if you increase your health, that's the only way you can really trigger that epic 15 damage Gamma Slam. So endurance is a good card. She has pretty strong basic activations for either her attack or her recovery stat, and so I will look to run Earth's Mightiest Heroes to help get even more activations, especially if my deck is full of Avengers, and so I can use Earth's Mightiest Heroes to ready. It's also a zero cost card, bringing that cost curve down, allowing us to get more activations of what she is really good at, which is that 3 attack stat, or readying her, flipping down, and then recovering for 5. She does like all of the cards that came in SPDR, Unshakable, Limitless Stamina. She has more than 14 printed hit points, and so she can trigger these, giving her steady, as well as giving her extra readies, which does go into these are the basic cards that I was alluding to when we were talking about 1-2 punch, where Unshakable, you can still be stunned. It's just a lot harder to be stunned. Limitless Stamina, if you are exhausted, you can stand up. And then to kind of combo off of those 2 cards, Def Focus, we have 5 targets in our kit, and then 4 more if you add 3 Limitless Staminas and Unshakable. And so at that point, I am looking to run Def Focus, especially because Limitless Stamina is so good. You can stand up and utilize that activation again, that I will look to run Def Focus, even though we don't have a huge amount of targets, especially just in her core kit, that it can pay for. Alrighty, let's take a look and rank aspects. So we're going to rank these aspects in terms of what she is least good in to what she is best in, and we're going to talk briefly about each one of these, but protection is her 4th aspect. She does like to flip a good amount, which makes the traditional protection build a little bit harder for her to trigger, because if you're flipping every other turn, you're not taking advantage of those defense kind of side of protection. Now that we have some readies with like What Doesn't Kill Me and repurposes, she can play a fairly decent green deck, but it's not like the defend green deck. It's the ready and it's the go, go, go green deck. That being said, green does not really help her with her thwarting problem, which is why it's at the bottom. She needs help thwarting, and the other aspects can do that or just win faster before that's actually a problem. 3rd is leadership. So she likes the Avenger Swarm, the strength in numbers. This is nice once you get it going, but these builds typically are on the more expensive side, which does not really combo well with her high average cost already in her kit. Now, we can get around that. It's just something to be cognizant of, and something that kind of can limit the deck building. The allies can really help with thwarting, and then allies using strength and numbers to help with her card draw, to help get into some cards that are going to help more, can be a really strong build. It may be a little slow. It can be hard to jumpstart, especially if you're running higher cost allies. So look to run those lower cost allies and then either use them as card draw engines or helping with her thwart. It can be a pretty good build. That brings us to our 2nd place aspect, which is aggression. She has a really strong rush strategy. She's a very powerful rush hero. She has a lot of damage output. She can struggle with rush like any rush character can if a villain has a little bit more health or like techs against that rush. That being said, she can win fast, and she can win a lot of the time. She can win before threat ever becomes an issue, especially in standard play. She can have a little bit more of a tempo-based aggression build, but rush is really strong with She-Hulk, especially in standard. But with the tempo-based aggression build, which means that, you know, I'm not trying to win in 3 turns, I'm trying to manage the board state, but keep it going along at a nice tempo. She can struggle with threat. Aggression doesn't have a lot of tools in the tool bag to help with threat mitigation. We do have Chase Them Down. We have a couple of cards that can help with threat. And so if you're not rushing, look to add in cards that are going to help with the threat. Include like Psylocke or somebody that can help confuse. We're starting to get a little bit more tools, which is making aggression a little bit better, especially for those solo plays and those tempo builds. But if you have not tried Rush with She-Hulk, please try it. It's a lot of fun. Highly recommend. And then that leads us to our best aspect for She-Hulk, which is Justice. Because she likes to flip so much, she really enjoys the aspect that best facilitates that. You can use the Justice cards to offset her thwarting issues, and then At that point, you have a fairly well-rounded hero. You can use cards to confuse or just mitigate threat, and then She-Hulk can focus on what She-Hulk wants to do, and that is throw a significant amount of damage. So that's kind of why Justice works so well, is it just complements her damage focus kit so well that you can pretty much run Justice with She-Hulk and have a good time. The community had right around the same as I did. It actually was kind of funny. Leadership and Protection were tied for fourth, so I'm just gonna say that we had the same and just assume that we were good. I also put out the poll, and y'all voted to put her as like a B/C tier. And I am going to agree with you all again. I'm going to put her at a C tier, right above Hawkeye. She can get wins, but she struggles on threat, and she struggles in other aspects outside of Justice a little bit more than a lot of the other heroes. Her damage output is incredibly high, which makes rushing a really fun strategy and a really strong strategy against certain villains. However, when I'm looking to rank heroes, I want to try and take a holistic approach and see how they perform in multiple different scenarios, and scenarios where a lot of threat is present, a lot of things are happening where she can't go face to face with the villain all game. She can struggle, and that hinders her. She is kind of, I'm not going to say pigeonholed into Justice, but She-Hulk really likes Justice because it does complement her hero kit so well, which means that she is not as good in some of the other aspects, which is another criteria that I take into account when I am ranking heroes, is how can they perform in multiple different scenarios with multiple different aspects. That being said, she can be really, really, really good with the right matchup and the right aspect. But when I'm ranking heroes, I like to take an entire picture at it. So there are cool and fun and epic matchups that really help her. She-Hulk has a pretty high cost curve, which comboed with her low hand size reduces her options pretty significantly, which is another reason why I'm landing her at the lower end of the power level. Once she gets her engine going, she gets those focus rages, she gets resource generators on the table, she can be pretty powerful. Overall, I was pretty happy with this one because I enjoyed her a lot more than I remember. Now, I don't necessarily, she's not the best hero. I don't even know if she's a good hero when combined, or when compared with a lot of the other heroes that we have in this game. That being said, I had a lot more fun with her than I remember having. So I was pretty harsh on her in my ranking video, and so I'll link that somewhere if you all want to see that. But she was at the bottom of the list. My historical knowledge of She-Hulk is that I did not like her at all. Now that we have expanded our card pool, we have some more strategies that work with her in a couple of different aspects, which makes her a lot more satisfying to play. She also, I think, has a fairly decently steep learning curve because of how much you want to be flipping. And as a solo player, I feel like we've kind of like been taught not to want to flip that much. And when you do get into learning how to flip and making sure that you can manage the threat that's being placed when you do flip, she has a pretty interesting playstyle, and one that I found a lot more satisfying than I thought. Now, these videos are focused on solo play, but I do want to, well, I've been asked, and I do want to try and talk a little bit more to the multiplayer side. What I will say, and I will caveat this, is I don't play a ton of multiplayer, and so a lot of this is kind of speculation, and so take it with a grain of salt. Listen to Step Into the Portal. Those people who play a lot more multiplayer, they're gonna have a lot better understanding on how they do play in multiplayer. That being said, I do think she's gonna be a much more fun and powerful hero in multiplayer. When you can focus on damage and let other players worry about the threat, you can have some pretty epic builds going. She has a lot of health. She can use health as a resource, counterattack. She can throw damage and just let the Black Widow player manage the threat, and you can put out so much damage with She-Hulk, and that feels very, very fun, and something that I kind of wish I had brought a She-Hulk deck, now that I'm saying it out loud, to Con of Heroes, so that I could play her in a multiplayer setting and just seen how much damage you can actually put out. So that is She-Hulk. I enjoyed her more than I thought I would. I don't know if she moves out of the bottom tier of heroes, but I do think that I would play her more, especially in like a multiplayer setting. But yeah, this was fun. I enjoyed it. I hope this video was beneficial to you. I try and modify these and make these so that they are useful to you all. That's the entire point of these videos. And so if there is ever anything that you want to see added, if you're like, hey, this doesn't make any sense, why are you talking about this? Let me know, because I want to continuously improve these videos to make sure that they are being the best resource for the community. That being said, if you like the video, go ahead and consider giving it a thumbs up and a subscription to the channel, because I'm going through every single hero and doing these for all of them. I think that's about it, so appreciate you all watching. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you around. Peace.